Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Mike Poteet, sitting in for Tim Van Orden. You're listening to episode 26, Woman in Motion. We're going to start off with some Star Trek news.
And then we'll get into our main story, Woman in Motion, where we will be talking about the film of that same name regarding Star Trek, Nichelle Nichols, and NASA. You won't want to miss this one. Stick around. Well, you know, this is the first time that we have missed a week in the history of this podcast. We got through 25 solid episodes, and here we are 26, a week late, because I'm in Texas.
Well, yeah, I was going to say you had an excellent excuse.
We tried really hard to have an episode last week, but it just wasn't happening. We lost power for a while, and things were a little crazy in our state. So
that is an understatement. I'm glad you and yours are safe and warm and healthy.
Yes, I am too. It's crazy, as we're recording this right now, a week ago this time there was snow outside, and today it's like 70 degrees or something. I mean, it's like at least in the 60s. It's just so it's like nothing happened, It's
like your own unwanted version of the Genesis planet with all the types of weather known to humanity within not in this case a few hours walk, but
right. But
span of
a few days life. Yeah. It's Texas 0 to 70 in 4 days.
That's right.
That's what we do.
That's right.
But the thing about it is, and I want to say this up top, the thing about it is that yes, the weather's back to normal, the ice and snow are gone. But and for people like me who, though we experienced power outages, though we experienced water issues, I didn't have it nearly as bad as some of my neighbors, especially to the south of me in areas like Austin and Houston. There is so much damage that's been done, and there's so much cleanup, and there's so much recovery that's going on in Texas right now. People have lost so much. They've lost their homes. Yeah. They've lost everything they own. They've lost family members. It's really, really bad, and people are going to be digging out of this for a while. This is the kind of thing for a lot of people that is a life-changing devastation. So, I'm just gonna encourage you to first of all be in prayer for Texas and for other southern states that were hit, particularly Texas. I think worst of all. It's not just that we're not in the north. It's that our systems here failed us. Yeah. And Texans can handle the cold, but apparently our power grid can't. And at least in its current state. So be kind, and please keep people in prayer, and see if you can lend a hand in any way. Even if you just tell somebody, hey, pray for Texans, that's great. But also, if there are some relief organizations and things who are doing good work in the area, I'm going to put some links in the description. You can see what you can do to contribute to them. That would be extremely helpful, and we would appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
So, but here we are. We're back, and Mike, You stayed out of this entirely. Is it what's it like where you are? Is it?
Well, we had lots of snow and ice last week, but of course our power grid is used to it. And we're used to it, and so we got about at least a foot here at our house, just outside Philadelphia. Had a little bit more today, not anywhere near as much. So there's still snow on the ground, but we're going to get above freezing for the first time in a while this week, and we should be seeing that melt away.
All right, that's good. Well, I'm glad everybody up there stayed safe and well too. That's awesome. Yeah. So that aside, we are looking toward the future, thankfully, and we have some Star Trek news, or so I hear. And
we do, yeah.
So
just 3 days ago, Michelle Hurd, who plays Rafi on Star Trek Picard, posted a picture of what looks like maybe her script book, and her mask, her face mask, to Instagram with the caption "Back to work," and it feels so good. So Star Trek Picard, apparently the cameras are rolling again. Work is proceeding on season 2. No date given for when we'll see that, of course, but it is on the way. So that's fun. And something else on the way, a little bit further down the road, is the new animated series Star Trek Prodigy.
Right.
And last week, news came out from Billy Campbell, who was a guest on a podcast. And the name of that podcast was the Comic Book Central podcast. And he announced he will be coming back as Captain Okona from the second season of The Next Generation to an episode of Star Trek Prodigy. He'll be voicing the role of Okona. And
wow.
There's lots of characters who were only on once on The Next Generation that I might like to see again.
Yep.
Captain Okona probably would not have been on my list.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that.
It's an interesting article. You can find it at dailystartreknews.com and probably other places as well. But
link in the description.
Yeah, apparently he talks on that podcast about how he looks back at the role of Okona, and also apparently he was under consideration for the role of Riker.
Yeah, I believe he was. That's right.
And I guess Okona was a consolation prize. But
there were a couple of those.
So if you're a diehard Okona fan out there, you've got more Okona canon to look forward to.
As long as Joe Piscopo doesn't show up and try to teach somebody how to gesture with a cigar, I am fine,
Yeah.
That's
no
great.
word on Piscopo returning to the Star Trek universe anytime soon. I mean, all things
painful.
are possible.
I mean, Joe Piscopo is fine.
They can give everybody their own.
Yeah, nothing wrong with Joe Piscopo in general, but like that episode was painful. That part of that episode was painful.
It was. I think Brent Spiner did magnificently with what he was given, but what he was given wasn't very great.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. There are a couple of good scenes in that episode. There are some good things, but that wasn't one of them. Well, that's exciting, and I'm really particularly excited about Picard season 2 being underway because, I'm just really looking forward to it. We're of course going to talk about it on the show, so I'm looking forward to that.
There are some interesting storylines left for that show to develop, for sure.
That's very true. So, all right, my Star Trek news. First piece of Star Trek news is a pretty cool thing that I just want to share with our listeners. Maybe you're aware of it, maybe you're not. It's this really cool thing that has started called Women Make Trek. And it has just begun, and we're just about to lead into next month. We're leading into National Women's Month or Women's History Month. Women's History Month. And this is a really cool project collecting art of women in Star Trek. So there's all these different pieces of art done by different artists around the world of different women in Star Trek, and then talking about how that particular woman in Star Trek influenced them and inspired them. And it's really...
That sounds great.
Oh, it's super cool. There's a really great variety of art and great variety of styles, and it's all really, really good stuff. And there's also at least one interview in here. Is it an interview or it's a spotlight on Mary Chieffo, which is really cool. And I think they're going to have more things with that, cast and crew interviews, and it's going to be a really cool thing. They're going to do a lot of different stuff with it, and it's just really exciting that they're doing that. So check it out.
Where is this to be found?
Well, link in the description, but it's womenmaketrek.com, which is really easy.
Oh, it's its own site. Okay.
Yeah, it's its own thing. It's just launched a couple days ago. So, yeah, that's exciting.
Excellent.
And you can actually sign up to become a contributing artist. So if you're an artist out there and you're listening and you would like to do some cool art of a Star Trek woman to contribute to this, you can go there and find out how. So it's exciting. It's very cool.
I wish I had the artistic talent to do that. That would be very cool.
Right. Yeah. No, I feel the same way. I'm scrolling through this and I'm like, I can draw, right? Like I used to be able to draw. Like I could do something, right? Because it's just so cool.
Really, this stick figure is Dr. Crusher. I promise. Yeah, so I will leave
Yeah.
it to the talented visual artists
Right,
out
right,
there.
right. Yeah, agreed, agreed. So the other piece of news that I have is not exactly Star Trek news, but I just thought it was so appropriate given what we're talking about this week. Given that we're wrapping up, given that we're going into Women's History Month, we're closing out Black History Month, and we're talking today about this documentary about Nichelle Nichols and her involvement with NASA. And so it's really cool that just what, a couple of days ago? Oh, here it is. So on February 20th, 2021. So a couple of days ago by the time we're recording this, a couple more days by the time you're hearing it, there was a space station supply ship that was named after the black NASA mathematician who was featured in the movie Hidden
Oh,
Figures.
yes.
Yeah, did you hear about that?
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's cool because it happened on the 20th, which was the 59th anniversary of John Glenn's launch, which is the first American orbital space flight.
Yeah.
And the capsule is called the Katherine Johnson. It's named after Katherine Johnson. So that's really cool. She died almost exactly a year ago at age 101. It's a cool story, and there's some cool pictures that go with it. So I'm gonna put that link in the description as well because it's awesome. That's like real world
That is
Star Trek.
cool. That is cool.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that history being acknowledged. And I'm embarrassed to say I have not made the time yet to see Hidden Figures or read the book. So
Yeah.
I have some work to do there. But I
Hey,
think that's great.
there's a huge list of stuff. My life, like if it's not Star Trek, I probably haven't seen it. That's just the truth. In recent years, it's terrible. I have so little time to do anything that Star Trek just takes up my life. So this leads us, I think, very well into our main topic, which, folks, if you are unaware of this, we are the episode today is called Woman in Motion. It is about the film Woman in Motion, which is a documentary film about Nichelle Nichols and her work with NASA. The film is called Woman in Motion, Nichelle Nichols, Star Trek, and the Remaking of NASA. And it's really new. It was, I think, made or started shooting, I think, in like 2019. Because there are people in this movie who are no longer alive.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's really cool to see them, people like John Lewis and Dorothy Fontana. But this movie is, I mean, it's just fresh. We've talked about it the last couple of episodes. The reason I know about it is because of you, Mike. You brought this in.
It was a news item the first time I was on your show.
That's right. So thank you.
Yeah.
Because it was a Fathom event. And then also and then last week, Atwell let us know about when the thing was starting streaming. So it is available right now. It's pretty limited, the streaming, but there are links in the doobly-doo, link in the description, or you can go to this handy site called justwatch.com and just put in Woman in Motion. And I would highly recommend stopping this podcast right now. Go find it. It's on Vudu. Yeah. It's on Microsoft. It's on DirecTV right now that I know for sure. And you can rent it for like $4 to $5, or you can buy it for $10. It's worth it to buy it for $10.
It is well worth it. Every last quatloo, I went ahead and bought it, and it's less than 2 hours long. It's packed so much into such a short amount of time, but it's fabulous.
It's so great. And I mean, just a little review spoiler here. We loved the movie, but we're also going to talk about very specifically what's in the movie. And I really think so much of it is so great as a surprise. So if you want to do that, just stop right now, go check out the film and then come back and join us. Cause, we're going to talk about Woman in Motion. Here we go. So, start us off, Mike. Tell us more about how much we love this movie.
I was not prepared for how inspiring I would find it. I mean, I think as I mentioned when I brought it up as a news item, I'd known that Nichelle Nichols recruited for NASA, but that was all I knew. It was like a sentence in the old edition of the Star Trek compendium, and so I knew she'd done it. But to see her drive and her dedication, she basically took 4 months of her life and did nothing but recruit for NASA as they were recruiting the class of astronauts that would crew the space shuttle program in the
Right.
1980s.
Right.
And she was inspired to do it after hearing a presentation from Dr. Jesko von Puttkamer at the 1975 Chicago Star Trek Convention, which is famous for being the first big reunion of the cast after the original series went off the air. But as
Right.
she heard Dr. von Puttkamer talk about space, she became so awed and inspired by it all. But she says in the movie, in the documentary, that led to a feeling of disenfranchisement because she asked herself, where are my people in this? She took very seriously the idea that the space program was for the benefit of all humanity, but she didn't see women involved in the front lines. She didn't see blacks, other minorities involved in the front line.
Mm-hmm.
She went to NASA and found out women and blacks and other minorities were working behind the scenes, but the public didn't know it. And so she really felt convicted to do what she could to bring a greater diversity of people into the astronaut corps and to in doing that, inspire them the way she was inspired to build a future in space that would be for and benefit everybody.
Yeah, and that you boy encapsulated it so well right there. That's great. It's a good thing I didn't try to lead on this one. But yeah, no. What was amazing to me is like I think I had seen some stuff about Nichelle like doing some promotional stuff for NASA, and of course it wasn't just those 4 months. That was kind of the big first push, but she also continued to advocate.
It continued for decades. Yeah,
and continued to stay in touch with those astronauts and those people. Yeah. Well, they weren't just astronauts. There were other people behind the scenes and all kinds of folks that she helped recruit. And the numbers are just staggering. How much she increased enrollment, and particularly increased enrollment among women and among minorities. It was just amazing, just absolutely amazing. And looking at this and seeing that hey, look, it's a promotional video for NASA with Nichelle Nichols. Your initial thought is my initial sort of cynical thought, I guess, is, isn't that cool? NASA wanted to, kind of use Star Trek to reach out, and, sadly they couldn't get Bill Shatner, they couldn't get Lynn Nimoy, so they just went down the list and there was Nichelle, right? Because that's usually, honestly, what you think. I mean, Walter Koenig is in this, and he even refers to that tier of the cast as movable furniture.
Right. we were the movable furniture.
Right. Yeah. Which is terrible because they're all such wonderful people, but it's true.
Absolutely.
It's so true in a lot of ways. I think it's less that way maybe than Walter particularly will say, but it is that way to a degree. And you do sort of think that when you see one of that tier of cast members from the original series doing something, you just kind of think, they couldn't get any of the heavy hitters. But the thing is, I mean, that's how. At least
how it happened at all. Yeah.
That's not how it happened at all. First of all, but I think that's kind of a residual leftover from my younger brain, because in all honesty, I think of Nichelle, and I just can't help but think of Book from Star Trek Discovery Season 3 talking about his cat Grudge and saying, "She's a queen."
Boy, well, they use that word for Nichelle in this movie.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
She is just the most elegant, regal, dignified person.
Yes.
And and I guess not having seen the original series during its original run, I can't fully appreciate the impact Nichelle Nichols made on American television screens in that role, which, she's never been a character I've paid all that much attention to. Mm-hmm. But watching this documentary, I realize what a mistake that's been.
Yeah.
Because, she was groundbreaking just in terms of her presence on the show. And while she didn't have very many episodes where she got to really shine, she did have them.
Yeah.
And, so I can see why the several people in this documentary talk about just the impact seeing her on Star Trek made on them and how it was inspiring.
Yes.
In a way that, I just never fully appreciated
Yeah.
deeply before watching this documentary.
Well, and I love her, and of course, I love all of the cast members. They're all just great, and I've always hated that sort of second class status that
Yeah.
Nichelle and George and Walter particularly have held, because they're all such interesting people, and
Uh-huh.
they're all such great performers, and when they have their moments to shine in Star Trek, they're fantastic. There
Absolutely.
just aren't enough of those moments, and
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that is covered in this movie that Nichelle talks about, which is great, was that because of that, and what she gave insight into in the movie, which I did not know about, was that there was more written for Uhura
Yeah.
in the episodes, and then it just would get pared back and pared back and pared back
Yeah. It
to,
is a shame.
by the time it's on air, it's virtually hailing frequencies open.
Right.
And she was getting really frustrated, and that's why she was going to leave the show. And I never really quite understood that there was that promise and then not the payoff, and how
Yeah.
frustrating that was for her as an actor. And that led into, of course, the story that, I've heard a dozen times, if I've heard it once.
Uh-huh.
The story of Nichelle Nichols meeting Martin Luther King Jr.
But it's always so compelling.
It's a good
I thought
story.
I thought that too when she started. Like, okay, here's the story. This is the beat they have to hit, of course. But it is such an amazing, to think that if that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. only watched one fictional television show, and it was Star Trek, and he'd
Yeah,
watch it with his children.
yeah,
I love that Martin Luther King III is in this documentary, saying, Dad knew, as busy as he was, it was important to have time with the family,
hmm
and this is one way he chose to have that time. That's quite a testament to Star Trek.
it really is. It really is. And
Um,
I'll tell you, if you've heard the story before or if you haven't, the way it's told in this documentary is just about the best way I've ever heard it.
yeah,
Because it's not solely Nichelle telling the story; it's told through other voices as well,
yeah,
and it's all these. I appreciate so much the editing of this film, because it's clear that they had a lot of footage to work with, a lot sometimes of retellings of the same stories, sometimes by the same people, especially Nichelle. They have like 3 or 4 different interviews and things with Nichelle that they use, and the
yeah.
way they lace those things together, the way it's laced together. Todd Thompson was the director, and he's just masterful at telling the story by editing those pieces together. And coming from a video production and film background like I do, I understand very intimately the work and the skill that goes into this
I
level of
bet you
editing.
do.
And
Yeah,
I got to tell you, people, this is just excellently edited. But it really highlights, and I think is the richest, fullest telling of that story that I've heard.
I think
And
you're right.
yeah,
It definitely makes me want to seek out those other sources they used. They've got
yeah.
her audio book of her autobiography.
hmm
They've got a documentary filmed with her back in 1989.
hmm
So yeah, there's lots more out there about Nichelle to find and
hmm
watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's so great about this is that, you know, the way that Nichelle first had significance in Star Trek, the way that, because the story, if you haven't heard it, well, hopefully you've heard it, because hopefully you went and watched the movie. But if you didn't, here's the TLDR. Um, the short version, Nichelle was going to quit the show. She had I forget where she was. Was she at a convention?
I think it was at an NAACP event.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. And somebody wanted to talk to her, and she was tired. She didn't want to talk to him, whatever. But they said something to her, and she turned around, and it was Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I love your work on the show, whatever." And she said, "Well, thank you very much, but I'm about to leave because I need to do bigger and better than this."
Yeah.
And he said, "You can't leave. You can't. Don't. He said
Right.
essentially, you don't know how important it is for
Right.
black kids, for black Americans, to see you on that screen. And one of the things that I wish had been included in the documentary, they came really close to it, but they didn't do it. They have some footage of Whoopi Goldberg sitting down with Nichelle at the 50th anniversary convention. And there's no way she didn't tell this story. And I wish they had brought it in.
Uh-huh.
Whoopi, and I've told the story on the podcast before. Whoopi, growing up as a black kid in America in the 60s, saw Star Trek. And the first time she saw Nichelle come on, she called for her family. She said, "Everybody, come look." So there's a black lady on TV, and she ain't nobody's maid.
Right.
And and she said, and that inspired her right then, when she was a kid. And then as she grew up, to be able to be on Star Trek, she reached out and said, "I want to be on Star Trek. Where's a role for me?" Because I have to do this. I have to be on Star Trek. When Next Gen came out, and they created the role of Guinan for her. And the whole idea that, Guinan then becomes such an inspirational figure.
Right.
And it's just this full circle sort of thing, that not only is Nichelle representative, right, on Star Trek at the time, so that a young Whoopi Goldberg is inspired, but then Whoopi herself becomes involved in Star Trek and becomes an inspiration to so many people. And it's and I think it's something that particularly we as white Americans do not and cannot fully understand, I think. Or at least white Americans of our persuasion. Of our history.
And you and I as white men in particular, we've got
Yes.
plenty of male role models on our entertainment to look to, and plenty of white male role models to look to, and heroes.
But just the idea of the power of representation, the power of just seeing somebody like yourself, just there on the screen, being treated like everybody else, is enormous. It doesn't occur to us, I think, how lonely it can feel and how othering it can feel to be in this world that is awash in media and not feel like you're a part of it. Like Nichelle asked NASA, "Where are my people?"
Yeah,
Where
it's
are
a
my
similar
people?
kind of it's the issue of representation again, right? Because
Yeah.
they say as she started working with NASA realized they were dealing with a legacy of historic discrimination because the official line was, "Oh, of course anybody who's qualified could apply for the astronaut corps and be in." And I'm paraphrasing, but Nichelle said, "Are you telling me there's no qualified black people, no qualified women to be astronauts?" And NASA said, "Well, no, of course not." And that's when they prevailed upon her to be the advocate to help them rectify the situation,
Right.
because they said, "Yes, you're right. There should be blacks and there should be women in this astronaut group. So
Mm-hmm.
help us do that."
Well,
because
go ahead.
she was dealing with not only that on the one side, the historic discrimination, but a lack of trust on the part of women and blacks and other minorities. But she put scare quotes around it in the movie, which I think is perfect because it's awkward language. But
It is.
she said those groups didn't trust that when NASA said this is for you that they really meant it.
Right.
So she was a real bridge between the two groups.
Yeah, when she came on and said that, it was believable.
Yeah, right.
And there was also, because so much of that recruitment was going through the Air Force, and the Air Force wasn't interested
Yeah,
in those
the
people.
Pentagon had its own system, and they didn't
they-
want her messing with it.
They filtered out the people they didn't want, and they passed on, essentially the white males, to NASA.
Right.
And so she tells the story of when she's leaving the room, and she says, "Okay, so what about the people that you don't select? They could apply directly to NASA, couldn't they?" And they're like,
Because they're
"Well,
American citizens. Yeah.
yeah, they could." And Michelle's like, aha. and that's her in. And man, she just went for it. And I just admire, I mean, I already admired Michelle so much. But this film is a tribute to a number of things. I mean, it's a tribute to Nichelle, of course. But it's also a tribute to Star Trek, the power of Star Trek. Gosh, when you see that first shuttle you roll out and it says Enterprise on it, I mean,
yeah.
Gosh, I mean, I've seen that before, but in the context of this film, it just takes on such gravity and such beauty. But so it's a tribute to Star Trek, but it's also a tribute to NASA, and all of that.
Absolutely.
And all of that together, is particularly, again, with the narrative that is told in the film. I mean, when you're making a documentary, you're not just telling it like it is. You are telling a story about what you're documenting. And it's so masterfully,
what it means.
Yes, and it's so masterfully done that this is brought into that. All three of these things are images of the human spirit, are images of our desire to create and to explore and to engage and to understand the world and the universe in which we live. And that is so profound.
Yeah.
And I would go further from a Christian perspective and say that is sacred.
Yes, I like that description.
And
I felt a little bit of that even, watching this documentary in a week in which NASA landed the Perseverance rover on Mars.
Darn right.
Not a crewed mission. No human beings there, but still human beings behind that machine and everything it took to get it to Mars.
Yes.
I watched the landing and found it just many times more moving than I expected I would. I thought it would be cool,
Yeah.
But, just think, gosh, we as a species did that. That
Yes.
We're making a footprint on another planet, to look for signs that there was life there. It is just astonishing, and it's that same spirit that this documentary celebrates with the manned space program. And,
Yes.
The human space exploration program that to know and to explore.
And I tweeted something. I'm glad you bring up perseverance or perseverance as some of us would say. I'm thinking of perseverance of the saints.
I must confess, I'm ignorant of that pronunciation in a theological context.
Oh, really? Okay.
I've always said perseverance of the saints, but what do I know?
That's fine. But anyway, even with that, I'm glad you bring that up, because I tweeted something earlier this week. I don't tweet much, but I tweeted something earlier this week. Someone had shared a clip of video that the Perseverance rover took, a pan around the Martian landscape, and there's sound.
Yes.
And there's sound. There's audio.
You can hear the winds of Mars.
Hear the wind. and I tweeted, I retweeted it, and my comment was, I just want it noted. I don't know exactly how I said it, but I just want it noted that Mars sounds exactly like an alien planet from the original series.
Could you hear those little bells in the background?
Just about, but it's just that really eerie,
That's very good.
That's the sound, man. It's crazy.
So when Perseverance finds a blue singing flower, we can all smile just like Spock did.
Exactly. But I love that. I love that little convergence, and really this is, and Nichelle, was inspired by that idea, that this is real world Star Trek, and gosh, you think of all the hours and you think of all the work that people put into that Mars rover and that people put into the shuttle program, and you see the joy on their faces. Boy, it's so great that we get to talk to so many people who helped put this program together. There's even at least one person who saw it from like day one to the end. And Nichelle really was with the shuttle program from almost beginning to end.
Yeah, she was there when Atlantis went up for the last time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And oh my goodness. But you think about all the hours of work that people put into that.
It
It's
is
it's
astonishing. I mean, it's astonishing. We can really do great things when we have the will to do it and can find the
yes.
resources to do it,
Yes.
and we can do good stuff.
And
I
and the
wish we
thing
did
is,
more good stuff more
well,
often.
right, right. And the thing is, it's not for nothing. I mean, it's not just for this it's not this purely intellectual endeavor,
Right.
you know? It's about who we are as humans, and I loved so much that David Gerald was on there.
Oh yes.
And he said one of his famous lines that he says all the time, that I quoted in my book, that space is not the final frontier. The final frontier is the human soul, and space is
Yeah.
the place where we meet the challenge. And I'm like, man, yes, yes. And they had that great shot. This is one of the shots that moved me the most in the film. The great shot from above the clouds as the Atlantis shot up through, breaking the cloud barrier, and that stream of smoke behind it. Oh my goodness. I mean, it was just glorious.
It
And I
really
just I
is. Yeah.
just thought about what a beautiful thing this is that we do, and to put that much work into this kind of thing, and to risk as much as we risk. They talked about the Challenger, and we can go back to that if we want to. They talked about the Challenger explosion,
Right.
and they talked about the risk inherent in this and why we risk it. It's about so much more, and it has to be about so much more than gathering data. We gather
Yeah.
data because of what it tells us about us and our place in the universe, about what our destiny is and what our meaning and purpose in this place is, and all of our questing and all of our exploring that we do. And it's true in Star Trek, and it's true in real life, and it's true if you're breaking the clouds, if you're breaking the Earth's gravity, or if you are trying to find direction in a new career, or if you're having a baby. These explorations that we go on, they are exterior journeys, but we go on the exterior journeys because of the interior journey that we take, because of the interior place we are going. And that interior growing, that interior self, that is a divine pursuit. That is a spiritual pursuit, and it reminds me particularly of the astronaut who talked about the view of the Earth
Right.
from the shuttle. And I think you have the name written down, and I
Uh, Colonel Gregory. His
yes,
first name's escaping me just right this minute. Oh, um, Colonel Frederick Gregory.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, he was great to listen to because he said when he saw Nichelle's public service announcement for NASA, she's sitting in her blue spacesuit at the
yes,
console, and he said, "I knew she was talking to me directly."
yes,
And Nichelle Nichols said, she went on this recruitment for 4 months, saying, I'm trying to find that one person willing to take the chance. She was
yes.
taking a chance, and she was looking for fellow risk takers. But
Hmm.
yeah, he says that when from the space point of view, as he says, your concept of who your neighbor is changes. He talks about wishing we could get more politicians up in space, and then the documentary segues to Senator Nelson, who did go up
Yes,
into space.
that's
But
right.
he says, yeah, he says it all makes sense from up there. We're sharing this blue marble together,
Yeah,
and but I love that your definition of who your neighbor is changes radically
yeah.
when you can see the Earth like that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because that's a part of a thing that he was talking about, that he's like 90% of what we experienced going up in the first shuttle was exactly what we expected. It was
Right.
everything we had trained for. It's everything we had done. It's what we knew was going to happen. He talks about the ping, when the shuttle, when the boosters first go off, it rocks back a little bit and then rights itself right before letting go. It's
Uh,
called the ping. It just bounces. And he said we expected that. We knew that was going to happen. He's like, all this stuff went exactly the way it was supposed to go, and it was all stuff that we could expect and that we could anticipate. except for that 10% of the actual experience. And I thought that was so amazing and so profound, because like you and I can sit here and talk about this view that he had of the earth, right? But then there's the actual experience, you know, and it's like we. And I was thinking about this too in relation to some things that I've been listening to lately about people's journeys of faith, and you know, I don't know how much where I am on the balance of like an intuitive and an intellectual, right? But I definitely have a mystical, you know, side. But I also really, really have this logical, like, I don't want to say logical, but intellectual side, right? I'm very analytical in a lot of ways. But I try to kind of keep those things in balance in true Star Trek fashion.
Right.
But I think there's so much, and I experienced this writing the Gospel According to Star Trek book too. There's so much that I can say or think or write or read intellectually about who God is, about what my calling is, about the reality of God, about the reality of Christ. I can write about that. I can think about that so hard, and think about evidence so much, and think about theology so much, and just and feel like, okay, I know this stuff. But then there's that 10%. and it you know, it may not happen often, and I think maybe it happens more often than we allow ourselves to recognize. But that actual experience of something that tells us that there is a greater dimension to our existence, that there is a person and a spirit at work behind human history, behind our lives, behind our being. And there were those times when I was writing the book specifically, there were some of those sacred moments. Gene Roddenberry talks about that. He talks about that you know, writing Star Trek was a sacred thing. Was a time, you know, he talks about times when you're writing and you look up from the typewriter and you go, what did I just do? You know, I didn't necessarily have that, but I did have those moments where something connected in my mind with Star Trek, of a way that I interpreted it, or a way that I saw it, or I saw something that had been there that I hadn't seen before. Like when I discovered that Spock was still a Christ figure in Star Trek 4 and things like that just were profound and overwhelming, and were just, I don't know, I can't describe it as anything other than you know, God saying, hey, by the way, I am actually here, and I am actually real. And
and those experiences, when we have them, as you did in your book, as people do who are telling their stories of their experiences of God, you know, they're meant to be shared. You know, again, Nichelle Nichols said that the impetus for this work she did was the disenfranchisement she felt out of an experience of awe, you know, that realizing, wow, space is this incredible place, and she wanted her people, you know, women, minorities, she wanted her people to be experiencing that along with her, you know, and to be and not just passively experiencing it, but to be actively involved in helping others experience it as astronauts, as, you know, other roles at NASA. You know, it wasn't an experience to be kept to herself, which is why she felt this tremendous drive to undertake this incredible recruitment campaign.
Right. Well, and that's something that was talked about in the film, right? That it, you know, it wasn't just Neil Armstrong, you know, who stepped on the moon, like I stepped on the moon. That there's a connectedness of humanity that. It starts, as you pointed out, the film's in our correspondence. The film starts out with those famous words. one small step for man, one giant leap, or for a man, one giant leap
right,
for
depending on whose account you're reading.
right. One giant leap for mankind, and it actually also included the speech that was given by then First Lady Hillary Clinton, announcing the naming of Lieutenant Colonel Eileen Collins as the first woman to lead a U.S. space mission. And she said in that speech, one big step for women and one giant leap for humanity.
Right.
And I really appreciate that broadening of the term humanity. You know, I always in my work I use the words humanity and humankind. I don't say man or mankind because it's so limiting.
I think it's more than just being PC or whatever, because our language shapes our experience of the world, right?
Yes.
So for generations when mankind. Oh well, of course you understand that's generic, but it doesn't have that for people who aren't men. It doesn't have that effect. It's exclusive language.
Exactly.
And so what Nichelle Nichols wanted to do was to make those, to bring out what quote unquote mankind really meant. It includes blacks. It includes women. It includes other underrepresented peoples. As I was watching this, I was thinking about something I've been reading recently. It's a book called Reading While Black, African American Biblical Interpretation as an Exercise in Hope. It's by a priest in the Anglican Church of North America named Esau Macaulay, and has nothing to do with space or Star Trek, but it's a fascinating book, and he's pointing out that the Bible always presents the people of God as a multiracial, multi-ethnic, diverse people. Of course, as Christians, we tend to think of verses like Galatians 3:28, in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek, male or female, but all are one in Christ Jesus. But he says, even in the Old Testament, he talks about when the Hebrews left Egypt, he talks about the mixed multitude, the Bible says, that went up with them out of Egypt. So other people other than Hebrews were experiencing freedom through this act of God. He goes back even further to when Jacob comes to Egypt to be with Joseph, and Jacob blesses Joseph's two half Hebrew, half Egyptian sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. They become two of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right.
And so his point is that God's will for God's people is to be diverse. God is not interested in a monolithic, homogeneous people. When God makes a people for himself, as the Bible says, it is a diverse people, and that gives God the very fact of that diversity glorifies God.
Right.
And so I think Nichelle Nichols' mission wasn't theological, but I think there's a connection to be made, and I maybe can't articulate it very well, but she wanted everybody to see what she saw, that a giant leap for all mankind, that really did mean for everybody, and that needed to be reflected in the people who were taking those steps, taking those leaps.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too that I think you're right to say it's not necessarily theological in the sense that maybe theological thoughts aren't at your fore or something like that. But
wasn't
again,
for motivation as well.
Yeah, but again, it's no less sacred, and in fact, it's very deeply sacred, and that inclusion, that inclusiveness of all people is not just that the gospel is for everyone, right? Like anyone can come to Jesus, but also that this world is for everyone.
Yeah.
And that it is incumbent upon us to make this world for everyone, no matter who we are or where we come from, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Right.
And
right.
What I so often say is that, God's love is for everyone. Yes, even them.
Yeah. It's not a matter of being inclusive to be nice.
Yeah,
or being tolerant, which is really a low bar to set when you think about it.
Right.
Tolerance. Michael Eric Dyson says something in this movie. He says Nichelle's work was important because she made us understand we would be present in whatever future could be imagined.
Amen.
And so, talking about making the world is for everybody and the world's future is for everybody.
Yes.
part of our vocation as stewards of God's world is to make it as good a world as we can for everybody and everything.
Mm-hmm.
All life is created by God ultimately. So
Yeah. And so it's all
yeah,
sacred. And that concept too, that like there's so much emphasis, right, on salvation, particularly in evangelical Christianity. And particularly in certain subsets of evangelical Christianity, it's sort of being saved from the world, right?
right.
But I don't think there's any sense of salvation, true salvation, that takes us from the world.
Right.
I think true salvation is to be able to invest deeply in the world in a way that exposes to us the goodness and the truth and the beauty of God that is throughout all of creation, even out into the farthest star.
Uh-huh.
Because as again we say so often around here, all truth is God's truth, all goodness is God's goodness, all beauty is God's beauty. Because goodness is good because God is good, truth is true because God is true, beauty is beautiful because God is beautiful. And I just,
Yeah.
I may be seeing rocket fuel burn off, and I may be seeing like a big hunk of metal and and
Uh-huh.
aerodynamically created thing, and I'm seeing the work of human hands that's punching through those clouds. But I'm seeing something something that tells me something about God, because it tells me something about the God who created the beings who did that thing.
Yeah.
Because that's a really amazing, really incredible, beautiful thing. And that doesn't happen by accident.
Right.
That happens because someone created a space and a place and a universe and laws that govern that universe, that life emerges in such a way that it's not content just living. Right? There's so many creatures on this planet who do nothing but just like are born and they eat and they make more of themselves and they die. I recall years ago seeing a spider on its web in the corner of the bathroom, and
Uh-huh.
I would go in day after day, and that same spider was on that same web in the same position, just sitting there, saving all its energy, waiting for a meal. The most interesting thing it did in its life was build that web, eat, and make little spiders. And there's something about the human condition that makes us not content to just make a web and eat and make little spiders, or make little humans, but rather that causes us to want to reach out even beyond our own planet, to explore
Yeah.
and to find something more than ourselves with which we can be connected. And I think that's something profoundly beyond just the simple neural function that makes us think and makes us have big brains as humans. There's
Yeah.
something more to us.
I think so too. And so, as we're having this conversation, part of me is thinking we're in real agreement on this, and I'm thinking about um, the argument others might make and have made throughout the history of the space program. In her PSA, Nichelle Nichols says that NASA is your space organization. I'm paraphrasing. Working in space to make life on Earth better here
Right,
and
right.
now. That doesn't always go unchallenged, right? Like
Right.
I was writing a piece for the curriculum I write for back when the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 was being observed,
Mm-hmm.
and many people at the time, including many prominent civil rights activists, Ralph Abernathy, I believe, was one who I remember, were very critical of the vast expenditure of time and resources on this project,
Yes.
which was motivated by a large part with politically, we're going to beat the Russians to the moon,
Right.
um, and they said, what's being done for the people here on Earth, and especially for black people and other uh, underprivileged, oppressed peoples.
Yeah.
So what would we say? It's I like you. I see all the grandeur and the intimations of something bigger in space and space flight and exploration. But
Yeah.
but how do we make sure that we don't just rest with those good feelings, and
Yeah.
how do we translate that to something practical and concrete, which I think Christians are called to do. I love what one of the theologians I enjoyed studying most in seminary was Karl Barth, the great
Mm.
Reformed theologian of the 20th century, and he was talking about this idea that sometimes our belief in God's sovereignty and God's grandeur and glory make us dismiss what humans can do. And he wrote this. He said, "Last things do not take place on earth. In other words, things of ultimate importance that humans do. Last things do not take place on earth, and yet why should not little things and even great things do so?" So I think there is this place to wonder, how do we translate the great thing that is spaceflight
Mm-hmm.
into little and even great things for those on Earth who are um,
Left
suffering,
behind.
who are, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know what your
I
thoughts are
agree.
on
I
that.
mean, I don't think there's any way. I mean, just you can go look up a song called "Whitey on the Moon."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That came to
Um,
my mind. Yeah,
you know, it's not it's not untrue, right?
right, right.
Um, there ought to be more balance and there ought to be more equity. We can only, I think, the only thing we can do is everybody in whatever sphere they're in working to help other people live better lives. And I think
Yeah,
what Nichelle did, that we talk about in this movie, was to bring people who were being left out and
right,
bring them
right.
in, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what we need to do, no matter what that umbrella is, no matter what that tent is, whatever. We need to be sure that we're bringing people in, and we have to do that in every area of life. And people who are called to be scientists need to be scientists and astrophysicists and physicians and what have you. And people who are called to be construction workers need to be construction workers. People who are called to be parents need to be parents. We all have to pursue the things that make us who we are in this life.
right.
And I don't think you can just categorically hold it against someone that they're off doing something expensive, right? As though they don't have the right to do that. I don't know that that's always the case, because I think there's spheres of life and spheres of existence. But yeah, at the same time, I don't think we should be doing these kinds of things at the expense of the poor, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it is a question of what we find the will and the money as a society to do.
Yes.
And even as much as we spend as on space exploration now, certainly, how many more times than that do we spend on defense
Right.
and weapons? And so it is it's it's that question of what society considers important,
Mm-hmm.
and how do Christians relate to that, and related to this maybe is it is very moving to me to learn that three of Nichelle Nichols' recruits were on the Challenger
Oh
when it
yeah.
exploded in 1986,
Yeah.
and the movie spends a little bit of time on that, and she was obviously very close, especially to Judy Resnick, and
Yes.
still grieves that loss greatly. The documentary, and I can't really fault it for this, but it hints at but glosses over, you know, where the culpability for that was. And I get that that's not the story this filmmaker is trying to tell, but
Right.
remembering that and the fallout and the investigations and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course losing Columbia in
Mm-hmm.
was it 2002, I believe.
Right. Yeah.
Um, it raises questions about well, this is kind of the questions we talked about in our terraforming episode, like just because we can do something, should we? And are we sure enough that we're doing it well? Um, I don't know. What are your thoughts on how the
Yeah.
movie
I think there was
deals
a
with Challenger?
line about losing faith in humanity, right? In
Right.
our when that happened,
Yeah, and our ability to do the things you have to do to go to space. Yeah.
right, right.
Um,
I I would love. I don't know how to live in a world where everything can be equal, like truly equal. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to live in a world where, we tell scientists to stop being scientists.
hmm.
I don't know how to do that. I do know how to live in, how to try to help make a world that is more generous and that is more compassionate. Um, and maybe one of the ways that we do that is to see the great things that we're capable of, and and to recognize that we can say, wow, look at us human beings. We did this great thing. We launched these people onto the moon. But the people who launched to the moon, right,
Hmm.
are no greater than the people who are starving in the streets.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if the capacity to go to the moon is in those people who actually did it, then if nothing else, the strength of spirit and the value of personhood is in that person who's starving in the streets. Like that. I forgot the name already. Frederick.
Oh, yes, Frederick Gregory.
Like Frederick Gregory said, that concept of who your neighbor is changes
Yeah.
when you go up there.
Right.
Gosh, maybe more of us could be launched into space
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that we can make things better down here.
Uh-huh.
Um, I remember the Challenger disaster. I remember watching that happen live
Yeah.
when I was a kid at school. And I remembered watching very closely and being like, okay, don't forget. Like, I'll remember that for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
because it's this path toward some kind of greatness, but at the same moment the frailty of human life. And with that, I think that tells us that whatever we do technologically, whatever we do just in our daily individual lives, we have to approach with great humility,
Yeah.
with understanding that
Yeah.
everything that we have is a gift. And I think when we understand that everything that we have is a gift, that even if we worked to earn what we have, the power that we had to work to earn was a gift in itself.
Yes.
That then we can understand that what we have can also be a gift to other people who don't have the power within themselves to work to earn, and or who could, but their need has become too great for them to be able to overcome it. And there are so many things in our society and in our systems of the way our world works that hold people down systemically,
Hmm.
much the way NASA systemically was not reaching out, right,
Right.
to women and to people of color. And uh, and when we can see those things, it's daunting and it's terrifying to think about trying to do something to change them. But you know what? Nichelle Nichols saw that and she said, "Well, darn it,
Yeah.
that's what
I
I'm going to
love.
do."
Yeah. I love that she says at the end of the movie, she's always an optimist, she says, because if something is not right, you have a chance to fix it. I'm
Yes.
paraphrasing a little bit, but that's what gives her optimism is that we don't have to be helpless in the face of daunting wrongs.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think so. Yes, I agree with you. And a piece from my own tradition in the Presbyterian Church USA that helps is recognizing that all we can do is provisional too. One thing we say about the nature of the church is the provisional demonstration of what God intends for all humanity. So on the one hand, there's no pressure to be perfect. We don't pretend the church is without fault or
Hmm.
without flaw, but we affirm the church when it's being the church, when we're being faithful to who God calls us to be. We are doing God's work and God's will, and the church is the body of Christ, both in its corporate life and in the lives of its individual members. We
Hmm.
say, and it's called to give shape and substance to this truth. So, however we can, however imperfectly we do, we give shape and substance to that truth where we can, when we can,
Hmm.
and we trust God for the rest, for those last things, as Bart said. But in the meantime, we can do little things and even great things, and that's part of our vocation.
And so many times, and I think that's so beautiful. And so many times, the great things that we do really are the little things.
Yeah, yeah,
And living in a time, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, living in a time here in my home state when so many people
right.
who were just going about their daily lives, some of them barely making it, some of them doing quite well. They're all, so many of them, at the same level now, just
Yeah,
needing water. Just get me water and get me warm and get me food. I've got to figure out ways to do that and ways to help my family. And
yeah.
so many people are so powerless right now. I mean, literally without power, is it
Right,
in
right,
terms
right.
of without electricity, but also without power to do anything to help themselves or to help their neighbors. But we do our best, and people are coming alongside one another. And there's just such that leveling there, that the smallest thing right now,
Uh huh.
you know, Jesus said, even whoever gives
Right.
even a cup of water to one of these little ones, will
Uh
surely
huh.
not lose their reward. Man, there are people who need water all over this world.
Right.
Just water. Just water.
Yeah.
And there's things that we can do to help them get water.
Hmm.
And something as simple as that can be as profound, as divine, as sacred as punching up through those clouds.
Yeah.
There's no difference. There's no difference. Because the Spirit of God that imbues and indwells our human nature and our human spirit, that same Spirit that drives us to the stars is also the Spirit that can drive us to our neighbor. And as the film tells us, our neighbors are plentiful. They're close. They're closer than we think they are,
Uh huh.
and they're not so different from us as we might imagine. So, great film. I mean, obviously, our conversation has gone to places beyond the film, as it always does here. But gosh, what a great film! Gosh, what an excellent, excellent film! I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah. Highly right.
Um,
Even if you're a Star Trek fan, it's of obvious interest. But even
yes,
if if you're not listening to this podcast. But if you know people who aren't, you should prevail upon them to watch this because
yes.
it's just got so many levels of engagement, and it is so inspiring.
If you're a Nichelle Nichols fan, if you're an Uhura fan, if you're a Star Trek fan, if you're a NASA fan, if you just love humanity and good
Yeah.
stories, check out Woman in Motion. It's really an excellent, excellent picture. And gosh, thanks, Mike, for bringing it to my attention. I wouldn't have even known about it probably.
Thank you for
And
telling me it was streaming. I thought I had to wait months
thank,
to see the
yeah,
thing. I
well,
was so thrilled that just a few weeks later, bang, there
yeah,
it is.
fantastic. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So check it out. All right, so audience question.
So, audience question, yeah, Kevin, people have asked you, would you ever do a Star Trek Bible, either telling Bible stories in the Star Trek universe or a Star Trek themed study Bible? What do you think?
I've always felt like that was kind of a bridge too far.
Mm,
Honestly, it's first of all, like retelling Bible stories in Star Trek characters, like I think that's kind of been done within Star Trek itself quite a few times.
right, definitely.
Intentionally or otherwise.
Uh huh.
Um,
Uh huh.
and so I'd have to ask myself, well, what's the value to it? And then also there's the whole trademark issue and stuff with things like that where you're creating fiction. But then like the study Bible, and again, I'm not sure that the copyright issues would work out and trademark issues would work out
Yeah.
with doing it, because the work that I do is commentary on Star Trek, right?
Right.
And so I can comment on Star Trek all day and night, and that's fine. But making something that's commentary in the Bible using Star Trek, that might get into some sticky areas. I remember working in Christian bookstore years and years ago, America's largest Christian bookstore, and we got in some Bible studies that were independently produced. They were like with video cassettes and stuff of like Andy Griffith Show Bible study. They were
Oh
super.
yes,
Do you remember this?
I remember
Oh my
those.
gosh!
Yes,
Yes,
yes. I
they were.
think I may have used one in my congregation
Oh
once. Yeah,
man, that's
yeah.
amazing. Well, they were super popular. They'd sell out
They
so
were. It was
fast.
the big. It was the big fad for a while
Yeah,
there.
yeah, they'd sell out in a hurry, and people would be coming in asking for them. We'd be like, "We don't have them. We don't know where they're coming in." And here's the spot where they'll show up if they do. But then they gradually just stopped coming in, and I think they got slapped with cease and desist because they were using
Mm,
clips from the show and
yeah.
all that, and it wasn't commentary on the show. It was using the show to sort of. So I really am cautious about that just from all those legal angles, but also I'm not sure I could do it, and it would to me just sort of strain the limits of what I'm doing. I mean, the whole reason that we do Gospel According to Star Trek is just because I love Star Trek, and it has genuinely informed and deepened and enriched my faith.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to share that journey with other people. I'm trying not to force it. And, like I have all this stuff in the first book. There's this complex stuff with Christ as a Spock. I always do that. Spock as a Christ figure. I always try to say Christ as a
Christ
Spock
as a
figure.
spot figure.
It's got to happen at least
We're
once.
worried about you, Kevin. Taking it too far.
Oh boy. But there's all this stuff, but it's not, I wasn't looking for it. It just came up and
Right.
slapped me in the face, and I couldn't not write it down. I mean, it was too cool,
Uh-huh.
and it helped me seeing Spock as a Christ figure and Data and other people as Christ figures helped me to sort of think about what Jesus means and think about
Yeah.
what Christology is, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I think doing a project like that to me would not be coming from an honest place for what I want to do and what I'm expressing. I mean, for what it's worth, it's my art. And
Yeah.
and so it has to come from that genuine place. And I appreciate that people think I could pull something like that off, but I don't think I could.
Well, I totally think you could, but I agree with you. You probably shouldn't. Um, but I tell you one thing. One way of
Sorry,
using
I had flashes of Ian Malcolm just then. But anyway, go ahead.
theology finds a way. But I know with my youth group, I used to use a curriculum called Reel to Real,
Oh yes,
REEL to
sold that from
REAL.
Cook.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, no, it was from. Well, maybe they had one
Was it
like
Cook
it,
or
but
was
the
it?
one or Cokesbury.
Oh, was it Cokesbury? Yeah, I get Cook
Yeah.
and Cokesbury mixed up. Yeah, it was
Um,
Cokesbury.
and that's fun because you get to deal with popular culture,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't run into the copyright issue because you're not putting out videos or whatever.
Right.
You can refer to time indexes on DVDs and so forth at
Yes.
that time, but you're really focused on the Bible and the spiritual lessons and asking questions about the story that kind of tease those out and
Mm-hmm.
just the way you do on this podcast. and it's very natural and very organic. In fact, the first professional curriculum writing assignment I had was to do an issue of that on the movie Signs that M. Night Shyamalan directed.
Really?
And it was great. And I was so glad to be finally writing for this curriculum I admired for so long. And I was all set to do more. And then they told me, well, we're actually stopping that curriculum.
Yeah.
So I think you're right that it may have been cease and desist, but also there's a saturation point for things like that.
I think that's true.
But
well, the thing is that stuff aged out really quickly, and so the printing of it and the using of it in churches, it's not as perennial, and it's not as they'd sit on the shelves for a long time because it's pretty niche, and I think they just didn't sell enough of them. I clearanced a lot of those things.
And if Andy Griffith was pretty niche, then Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I've also found sometimes when I'm hot to use Star Trek for some curriculum purpose, I have to stop and think, okay, is this really what's going to serve gospel best, or am I just wanting to get more people into Star Trek? I remember pitching my editor once a three-session series on the trailer for the 2009 Star Trek film, and he said, Mike, I think that's probably
a bit much.
No. That's a hard pass. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right.
Well, I appreciate your dedication to Star Trek evangelism. That's good. And I am filled with even more pride that I know that you wrote for Reel to Reel. I got to go get that issue now.
Just the one issue, but it led to other things, so I was glad for that.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks for asking that question. And we always love getting stuff from listeners, so we appreciate that very much. So next week I'm going to be joined again by David Atwill of Real World Theology, and we're going to be talking about something cool. I promise it will be fun. We've kicked around a lot of ideas, and we'll just have to see what comes out of the hopper. But it's going to be exciting, and I hope you'll join us. And in the meantime, please like, share, rate, comment, and subscribe. And also be sure to send us your questions. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter and Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to discuss your question on the show. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, I am Kevin C. Neese. My guest host has been Mike Poteet. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. See you next time.